Hey there, Brandon here, and welcome to another episode of Stack and Scale. And today we're going back to Clay. It's been a while since we've done a Clay workflow because we've been so caught up in Claude, right? The whole world has. And of course, we have too. But I hope you've enjoyed some of those other Claude issues and some of the Claude stuff I've been putting out with Claude and Claude Cowork and Claude CLI, Claude Code, and last week we did one on Claude Design. So I'll keep pumping those out as I find new, cool, fun things to show you guys. But today we're going to come back to Clay. And what I'm going to show you today is how to automate investor intros. Now, this is something that more early stage companies focus on a lot, but also relevant for later stage companies. And I'm going to show you other things you can do too. We're going to set this up to automate investor intros, but instead, I'll show you at the end how we could maybe automate intros for mutual connections that you have on LinkedIn. There's a bunch of other ways that we can, kind of tweak this and modify it so that it really fits your use case a little bit more. But we'll go through the investor intro automation piece just to give you an idea of what's possible and the things that we can do. And then again, feel free to adapt it and figure out how to make it really work for you. So with that said, let's just jump into the Clay workbook itself. So here we have this right here is going to be the only field that you're going to have to input. Now I put company name, and it does work if you just put the company name. But what I found is actually if you put a like common word in there, or maybe it's a name of a company that has a bunch of other companies that could be similar, I found that just putting the actual URL in there. So if you guys know Unify out there, I did an episode on them a while back, actually, and how I like what Unify is doing on the automation and the outreach and using AI and also some GTM engineering principles to do that outreach. But I wanted to use them as an example here. Why Unify? I don't know. They were just top of mind. I was talking about them with an investor recently. So they were top of mind. I threw them in here, and I'll show you what this does. And the other one is drone deploy. Again, no real reason, just that they were top of mind, and it was a good company that I could show you. You could just put the company name if it's like unique enough. I think drone deploy is a pretty unique name, and it actually went in there, it found the domain, and enriched it, and it went through this whole workflow. But here's what we're doing. So first is finding the domain of the company here, and we have our waterfall set up, and then we have this is where we're pulling the investor intro. So this is the Owler integration. If you know Owler, one of the things it's good at is it'll show you investors. And we will use the Clay managed Owler account. So you don't have to have an Owler account. You can just use the Clay managed one. And we're looking at the domain that we just pulled. And then from there, you can, of course, again, grab any of this information here and put it into our table. And specifically, we're looking at the investor names. And then we can use some of this other stuff later on. But first, let's just focus on the investor names. So I pulled the investor names in here, and these are all the investors. And then here, I want to find common investors to my company. So what you're going to do is go in here, you're going to edit these. And these are just, again, investors that were top of mind. So I threw these in here, but if you just click use AI and then in here, delete these and then put your company investors in here to get intros to your companies, obviously. And then what it's doing here is now it's finding the actual investors. So who at Battery Ventures was the one that invested in Unify? Who at Bessemer was the one that invested in drone deploy. So we're pulling that out here, and then we're going to put it there, and then we'll do something with that in just a second. Of course, this is the person that we're going to email and say, hey, you invested in us. Can you give us an intro to Unify? Because this is the company that we want to go after. And then we're enriching the company here. And then we're pulling in some of the data from the company enrichment over here and the hour enrichment to do just a basic account fit score. So what we can do is come in here, we click use AI, and you can see these are the four things that I'm scoring account. Your total account score is 100. And then here's my scoring rubric. So go in here and figure out what makes the most sense for you, right? If you care about company size, you want to give this company size a higher score, more points, less points. You could do negative points if you want. You could even pull in technographic data in one of our other clay tables that we built. I showed you how to do a technographic. It's just a waterfall, finding the technology that they're using and then pulling that out and saying, all right, of all this list of technology, just tell me the CRMs. And then you can pull in if they're on Salesforce here or if they're on HubSpot, et cetera, et cetera. So a lot of different things that you can do here, but just for the sake of the demo, we're just scoring this account fit based off of the employee size, the industry that they're in, the revenue size, and their total funding. And then you can see here, this is the output for Unify, it got a score of 50. And then for Join Deploy, it got a score of 75. All right. And then now I'm going here, I'm using Clayagent to go do some additional research for trigger events. So why is now the right time to reach out to this company? And we're going to use that later on. And here, all right, this is the specific trigger event that's interesting. So they launched a product pretty recently. So good trigger event for us. And then what we're going to do is find the founders of this company, because we want our investor here to make an intro to the founder, Austin Hughes here. So all we're doing simply a find people table, and in the people table, you guys all probably know how to do a find people table, but it's very basic. All I said is find me the founders or co-founders, and that's what it came back with. And then, so that's in a separate table, but then I want to pull that information back into this table. So that's what I'm doing with the lookup single row from another table. So that's what this here is. I'm looking up this row from the table that I just found the people table from, or found the people from. So pretty easy, pretty straightforward, finding people, then pulling them back in here. So this is the founder's name. And then now I'm using AI to write me an intro. And here's the prompt that I gave it. And then I'm basically saying, write an intro, write an example email. Well, it's all, you'll see there's a subject line and an email of why I want the intro to this specific person and why it would make sense. And then you see it outputs the subject line here, or it outputs the email here and the subject line here. Actually, in this case, interesting, it put the subject line here, and then it put the body here, and then the subject lines here and here. Oh, that's interesting. Anyway, I only just now caught that. But what we also want to do here is put context. The one thing that you will want to go in and do and edit is just sender context. So I put Stack and Scale. I put this is the company, but go in here and put your company here and what you do here. That's the only thing you'll really need to change here. And then, again, it writes the subject line, it writes the email, and then a forward-friendly email that's going to be really easy for Dharmesh over here to straight send over to Austin. And you know what I didn't even think about doing, what I should do, maybe I should do this, I don't know, because I could also say in this forward-friendly blurb, I could say, Austin Hughes, and here's his email, because we did a lookup person and we found some information on Austin himself. We could put that in the email here. I actually didn't think about that, but that's definitely another thing that we could do. And then now you have an email that we can send over to Dharmesh and say, hey, Dharmesh, can you make an intro to Austin? Here's the exact email that you can copy and paste and send over to Austin. Now, a lot of different things we could do with this too, right? We could take this and drop it into a Slack channel if I want to see in Slack instead. Or maybe, hey, I'm sending this over to our CEO, and hey, CEO, you're not in Clay, but I'm going to give you all this data that I got built from Clay, and then I'm going to put it into Slack now that he can just copy and paste it from Slack. Or I could, of course, send an email too. Could send this in an email over to the founder, or I could just straight email Dharmesh. Now, one thing I didn't do in this table is found Dharmesh's email. But we could do that, right? But if he's an investor in your company, you probably don't need to waste Clay credits on finding his email. You probably know that already, right? So there's a bunch of different ways we could do. We could put this into a Google spread or a Google Doc if we wanted to, if we wanted it in a Google Doc for whatever reason. So a lot of different ways that we could take that and send it. And then, as I mentioned, there are other things that we could do instead of just finding mutual investors for introductions. We could actually find mutual connections on LinkedIn. So I recently did this with another company, and there's two different ways to do this that I found. One is you could use the Swarm integration here. So here you can find intros to companies, and then from there you would look up, find people within the company, or you can use the warm intro to a person. Now, the caveat about this is if you are using this integration, it does require you to have the API key for the Swarm. And if you're not paying for the Swarm, which I think is like $100 a month or something like that, for the lowest tier, what you could do is actually just go sign up for their 14-day free trial. If you sign up for the 14-day trial, you will get an API key, and then you can plug this in and use their API key and just test this out, see if this is a good, a viable option, a viable channel for you to find warm intros to your connections. So the Swarm is a good one. The other one too that I've used, and I've talked about this one before too, is Appify. So if you go into Appify here and find an Appify actor, so they're called actors, you can go to Appify and you can browse all the actors in the Appify store. And there's a bunch of them that will use LinkedIn and LinkedIn Common Connections. And then you can go over to find the right one, and then you run it off of the actor that you just set up. And the good thing about Appify is, yeah, you're paying by credits and how many ever credits you use. So you're purchasing credits and then you're using your credits, and you can start off with just putting $5 down, and you can run the actor 100 times or so. I mean, the different actors take different amounts of credits, but it's going to be different than the Swarm, where you have to be spending at least $100 per month just to get access to the API, whereas Appify is not quite the case. So that's another way you could use this workflow, is again, using, instead of common investors, you could do common connections on LinkedIn. All right, well, that's all for today. Hope this was helpful. Happy prospecting. And if you test this out, let me know how it works. All right, thanks. Talk to you soon. Cheers.